Hi everybody, welcome to the New Opportunity in Integrated Data Center Management, IDCM. My name is Mike Wilson, the Director of Marketing of Enlight Software. And I'd like to have each of my panelists introduce themselves, starting at the end with Enzo Greco.
May it please the court. I feel like I'm giving a deposition up here. As Mike just introduced, Enzo, I'm responsible for the data center software group within Carrier.
Hey everybody, Drew DePriest. I lead technology for the internal real estate team for a healthcare company called McKesson. Responsible for everything from administration, transactions, construction project management, all the way through disposition of the asset. So all kinds of technology and nerdy stuff.
I'm Brad Dankey. I'm with Carrier. I'm part of the Global Enterprise Solutions Group and overlaid to all the Carrier products, services, and controls.
Fred Gordy, I'm the National Practice Lead for Michael Baker International for Building Cybersecurity. We have AE, MEP, and also Sustainability and Resilient Solutions.
Okay, great. And I figure the first, before we really get into an active panel discussion, the first thing we needed to do was really define what integrated data center management was. So let's see here. Enzo, I guess, could you briefly describe what integrated data center management is so that our audience has a foundation for this conversation?
There's a lot of words up there. I'm not going to repeat any of them. I think real simple is if you look at any modern data center, the scale, complexity, and efficiency requires the different systems to be integrated. We no longer have the luxury of managing our IT systems independent from our building and our critical infrastructure. Managing all that together, that's IDCM. How's that?
That was great, actually. That's better than I would have done. I like it. Any other input from any other of the panelists? Nope.
Good job.
Okay, good job. Okay, well then let's throw the next question to Brad, since you just good job, Enzo. We might as well put you on the spot. So in the context of IDCM, or Integrated Data Center Management, what are the new roles that are going to be in responsibilities of HVAC mechanical engineers and facility people, and how do they differ from traditional roles in HVAC and mechanical today? That was a lot of words. Let me know if you need to read.
I'm fine. Thank you, Mike. Traditionally, IT and facilities were separated. Thank you. Then started merged together. With IDCM right now, with the thermal capacity and the data center needs to meet the IT loads, it all has to work together as a system. So there needs to be a crossover between what's happening in facilities with IT and appreciation and understanding of both, so that those who are doing facility work understand what it's affecting. And what's affecting is that IT load. And since it's in a mission critical environment and latency is reducing from chillers to convection now to liquid cooling, that latency is going down, so it's directly impacting the IT load. So they need to be cognizant of what the cause and effect is. What they do on the mechanical side, what they do on the control side, directly affects the IT loads.
Okay, great. Any other commentary from the panelists?
I'll add one thing. If we're talking about roles, I think it's also important to look at the life cycle of the data center. And what we are seeing is early stage data center design and build is also including IT considerations. Where are my high density racks? Where will I need precision cooling? And so what we are seeing is early stage, there are a lot more IT and just operational considerations than there ever were before. And I think that goes to the different kinds of roles, the different kinds of skills that we are seeing required for data center build and operations.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's pick on Drew. Drew?
What did I do?
What did you do? Nothing yet. That's why we're going to ask you a question. How does integrated building automation systems, enhance the efficiency and functionality of HVAC systems in a modern data center?
Yeah, also a lot of words.
So they can repeat.
Yes. I think a lot of us who have been in this space for a long time, I've been there for 20 years now, have seen BAS move from a place 15, 20 years ago. It was more of a bridge between equipment. You could have a crack unit understand what's going on with its primary pump, which understands what's going on with its chiller. So the entire up and down full transition of physics and energy kind of has a feel for what each other is doing, maybe one point to another, where that has evolved really over the last, I think, 5 years, if you were here for the cloud native conversation in the panel before this, moving from a bridge between equipment to now a bridge between systems, which is a lot of what we look at within my team. We're starting to look at, a long way to go. But trying to understand, not just from an energy efficiency perspective, but from an asset optimization, more of the financial side, it's not just the operational data that we need to be able to capture and analyze over time, it's the operations on the maintenance side. So if the chiller, we can monitor water supply temp all day long. Cracking it, same thing, high temps, local, in the hot aisle, for instance. We also need to be able to understand from a business perspective, if a chiller is starting to show signs that maybe it's chill water supply temp is 5 degrees too high. The same machine, we also know from CMMS, has had 4 corrective issues in the last 2 weeks. It's also had a PM completed in the last 4 weeks. It also, we know, has historically been performing worse than the other 50 machines we also have across the entire portfolio. That really gives more context to the local facilities team to be able to understand, hey, this isn't just one particular hot aisle, there's a broader systemic problem that's happening within this particular machine. So I think it's still early stage in kind of that software piece of the blue arrows on your big masterpiece over here, Mike. Again, where it used to be just equipment to equipment, we're starting to see these things learn from each other with other systems of record that track how these things perform from a business perspective.
Very good, very comprehensive answer. Thank you, Drew. Any other commentary from any other panelists? Okay, Fred, we're going to pick on you now.
Good.
Excellent. Challenges and solutions. So what are the primary challenges faced by integrating HVAC systems with data center management equipment? And what are some of the innovative solutions to these challenges?
So before I get into that, if we could go ahead to the next slide. Real quick question. How many people in here understand what a tabletop exercise is? Okay. So a tabletop exercise is, to kind of put it in loose terms, is when people will get together, typically IT does this, and they will kind of work out a scenario. In other words, well, if this happens, then this happens, and who's going to respond to this, and who's going to do that, and so on and so forth. So the reason I bring that up is this particular event, this happened in a data center in Singapore. And by the way, if you hadn't figured it out, I'm the risk guy. I'm the cyber guy. So this particular data center, most of you are probably familiar with that brand name, Equinix, up there at the top. Well, in Singapore, they're stringent about uptime because of the climate and everything. The 2 other logos that are below there had some co-location, or had servers in that particular data center. Now, sometimes it amazes me that people can look at an OT system and say, I have nothing to do with the IT system. And the IT guys say, I don't have anything to do with that. In this particular case, they were totally segregated. Their networks were not together. But what happened was the integrator, who I used to be one for 20 years of my life, I was an integrator, came in to do an upgrade. And when he did, there was a chill water buffer tank's valves closed, and they couldn't get them open. Now, there's 2 things to a data center that are its lifeblood, right? Cooling. What's the other? Power. Okay? So when you're doing a tabletop exercise, the first thing you do is you pick those low-hanging fruits, like what am I going to do if for some reason I lose chill water, right? Because otherwise we're going to have service cut off. During this time, the valves got shut. They couldn't get them open. The integrator was trying his best. For some reason, they got stuck. 2.5 million unsuccessful payment transactions happened for Citibank and DBS. But here's the interesting thing, because I always look down the channel, is Citibank and DBS also failed to move over to their backups. Okay? So it was just a cacophony of errors. And the reason I bring this up in context for this is one of the things that, regardless, I've worked in data centers, hospitals, all these different places. OT systems if you ask somebody, do you know what you have, most of the people will tell you yes, but then when you actually look at it, there's things there they didn't know anything about, and it's no different in the data center. So being able to integrate the OT devices into some type of asset management like this is not only going to give the facility guys information, but it's also going to begin to allow the IT guys to understand what it is that's out there. But the bottom line is that whole thing happened because there was no plan. That's it. And not just the data center, but also with seat bank and DDS.
Comprehensive. I guess then, Joe, based on our conversation, our panel discussion earlier today, or our presentation earlier today, can you tie this to the upcoming SEC legislation when it comes to risk mitigation and having to disclose, carbon sourcing and risk?
So that's actually an interesting segue there. So one of the biggest issues in the data center market, I think we're all familiar with, is legislation and regulation around data centers. Whenever you use so much of the world's electricity, you will become a target. And that's exactly what's happening to us. And one of the biggest pieces of legislation that's coming around, it's actually a regulation, is from the SEC. We're all familiar with the SEC. I used to be a Wall Street guy, New Yorker. And what the SEC is mandating for any traded instrument in the US is risk disclosure. Now remember, this is the SEC, not the EPA. The SEC does not have the right to ask you, how much carbon are you generating? That's not their role. But they absolutely have the role of saying, how does climate risk affect your business? So to give you a perfect example, imagine that you are an investor, you're considering investing in a bank. The bank has data centers that are evaporative, so they're using 1 million gallons of water a day, nothing unusual. But what happens if they are in a drought zone and they can't get access to water? That is a material risk that needs to be disclosed, because you as an investor, you should be aware of that risk. Because what if they can't source that water? That's a material risk to their business. And every company today relies on IT infrastructure of some kind, whether it's their own, in the cloud, in co-location. So this, I think, is a really good example, because this is a perfect example of a risk that should be disclosed. And this is the intent of the upcoming legislation. The SEC is not alone. All the jurisdictions around the world, Europe, Asia, China is actually taking a lead on a lot of this. So this is front and center for all of us. A real good connection there.
Yeah, interesting timing. Yes, sir.
Sorry, quick question. So can you guys put a dollar amount on what was the cost to these commercial entities, right? Because all we're talking about now is just like missed stuff and la 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 la, but the SEC cares because the investors are going to see a hit to revenue. So if you take it all the way to the logical conclusion, what did it actually cost you?
So I don't have an exact figure, but what I can tell you is the ripple effect, because this actually just happened in October. Okay, that seems like a little while ago, but they're still trying to put that together. I mean, just the missed transactions and everything. Somebody's going to have to pay for that. But if you do it in hard cold hours and try to put a dollar figure to that, I'm not going to try to do that. But I do know that they are trying to extrapolate that information out. So I'd keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Because this really, the Singapore, it's called the SMA, and it's Singapore, I can't remember what the M stands for, but they are the authority that oversees this data center. And kind of like the SEC, they've really come down on Equinix. And sidebar note is I have feeds that I watch, and I have trigger words and things like that. And I have Equinix in it. They're putting in an awful lot of immersive cooling now in those data centers.
Right. So they got religion.
Yeah, they got religion.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's a case study that comes out of this, because it's obviously a huge, it made everybody, around the world, it made everybody news.
Yeah, in addition to what Enzo's saying about pending legislation, there's already 2 legislations that are out there. One's Sarbanes-Oxley, and the other is PCI, if you're doing any credit card, any financial transactions. And like with Sarbanes, the CEO has to identify, to Fred's point, plans are in place to mitigate this risk. And if they aren't in place, and you signed off on that, SEC is going to come at you pretty hard.
Goes beyond the business value loss too, right? It's the internal labor to not only deal with the initial downtime, but the remediation. How do we prevent this from happening in the future? And from my perspective, being in the enterprise side of EAS deployment and operations for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been part of teams where, if anybody remembers the Log4j cybersecurity issue from 3 or 4 years ago, where we all kind of panicked and we were looking like, do you have Log4j? Like, is it, where in your stack is Log4j buried? My role at the time when this thing first came out, we had 0 visibility into any device in the fleet for 120 some odd buildings. So it was a mad rush for 3 people to sit down and crawl as-built drawings, literally in spreadsheets, building, device name, firmware version, location, IP, everything. So learning from that lesson, one of the first things that we've done at McKesson is build an inventory literally of every OT device that happens to be on the network. It's taken us 3 months to get there, and we're barely halfway there. But now someone comes out and says, oh, well, this version of this particular controller or this flavor of Tritium has a bug or has some sort of identified vulnerability. I go to a single dashboard and I just search. Cool, it's those 5. Rip them off the VLAN, gap it, fix it.
You bring up a really good point, is when you're looking at your OT asset inventory, it has to include things like that, end of life type things, that kind of thing. Healthcare group that I work with had 1,500 locations across the United States. I was telling them when I started working with them, they handed me an inventory list. Now you do the math. They have 1,500 locations and they gave me 6,000 devices. I said, I don't think this is right. Then WannaCry came out and all the Johnson controls running Windows CE. They was like, what do we do? And I said, I don't know what to tell you because you've got to find them all. That's the key.
And in that moment, when WannaCry hits and all of your VPs of operations are screaming at you, like, what is our exposure here? Even if it's 0, the fact that you can't immediately answer it is a huge problem. So for anyone here writing specs for systems like this, please include some sort of requirement of build a full register. I could give you 12 columns, that would be great to capture. It's hugely critical to keep these things in one single place.
Yeah, I mean, team morale is a business expense.
Oh yeah, I mean,
that's what, typically doesn't show up in the spreadsheet. But as a manager, if you have one event every 5 years, that's fine. But if you've got 6 a year,
yeah, yep, especially with
hosts, right?
With critical facilities,
and they're constantly panic mode.
Yeah,
full of adrenaline and cortisol, right? Stressful.
Oh yeah, the stuff we live for.
One last thing along that lines is, one of the things working in cybersecurity and risk is I figured out a long time ago that the answers to the questions of do you is not binary. It's not yes or no. So if I'm scoring you and you tell me, no, I don't have it, and you know that, that's better than I don't know.
Okay, very good discussion there. That was great. Can we extend this portion of the discussion to device management? In other words, data centers are full of things like power strips. Those power strips are about 50 different flavors, completely heterogeneous. How do you keep up with firmware and things like that? Is that even something to the J4 query or whatever that was? I mean, is it something you automate as well? Do you inventory those? Do you keep up with firmware?
If it touches our OT corporate network, or if it is a serial device sub to any of those, absolutely, 100%. Especially in those critical spaces, and we're talking about data centers here, we also manage a number of pharmaceutical distribution warehouses. Fully a third of every pharmaceutical drug that gets delivered in this country goes through a McKesson distribution center. Those things happen in minutes, and they deal with penalties in the area of millions of dollars. So it's not a matter of, hey, we may have an issue with this power strip or this breaker, whatever it is. It's there's an issue. We need to know what the fix is, and it needs to be fixed now.
Very good.
Michael, on this point, it's an interesting paradox because the smarter the device is, usually the more points of of breach it can introduce. And when you have, for example, a traditional dumb floor-mounted UPS, there's only so much damage you could do, right? Now when you have intelligence there, it's connected to the OT network. In many cases, it's on the fiduciary network. That's a whole different level of risk. And that's exactly what customers are dealing with.
Very good. Drew, with regard to future-proofing existing and new systems, what emerging technologies are driving the evolution in this space?
So I'm super bullish on ontologies in general. I wish we could get to a common one. There's currently 9 or 10. That's a separate panel that probably takes 3 days. For me, in order to get to sort of this multivariate, every point of your system knows context and relevance of everything else that impacts it. And in my world, that's not only the operational data of temperatures and pressures and statuses, it's kind of what we talked about before, is also what is the maintenance history, what is its current point in the asset life cycle, what's its value. That kind of, through ontologies and through technologies, there are a number of startups right now that can automatically map points from any number of systems and get them to a single relational graph. So when you think of an ontology, I look at things through, it's a node graph. So if you take a chiller, if you're just looking at it through the BAS lens, you're going to know temps, pressures, flows, everything. If you take that node and you map it over to your CMMS, you know its full maintenance history, its asset value, kind of expected life. If you move that over to what does it serve, air side, chilled water side, you then flip that over to an IWMS or some other kind of space floor plan mapping. You know the room that it's in. So now if you have a fire alarm or a safety event, you can alert that chiller, that thing has context of what's going on. If you hook it into some of these IDCMs that can get down to a rack level, I know that if I have a problem with this chiller, I go 3 nodes down, it's serving rack 17, which has this server, it historically spikes its percentage CPU at around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, it's 1:30 right now. Oh, by the way, flip that into our CRM. We also know that's our highest paying customer in the entire building. You've just given context to the concept of a single alarm. The analog for me in my previous role worked for a technology company in the workplace side. Our SLAs for responding to ES alarms for the general population was 4 hours. If you were VP level or above, it was 30 minutes. We would lose money if we did not respond to a VP because their room was too hot within 30 minutes. And we were doing it the old-fashioned way of, I have a spreadsheet, and I have 17 different server windows open on one computer trying to map. Eventually, the humans know that room 17 on the 3rd floor, that's the VP, take care of it quickly. With a graph, with the ontology of this brick, if it's Atari Core, haystack, whatever you're using, you should be able to instantly know that node in the ontology for room 417 not only belongs to air handler 5, chiller 2, but it also serves space 417. It is occupied, because we have the aux sensor, it is occupied and assigned to a senior VP, and if we can somehow peel that calendar into the graph, oh, they're in meetings for 6 hours today. So when that alarm comes in, it's not just a single point flashing in the ether, it's, holy shit, this is super important, and the chiller's on the fritz, you've given that thing context. That is the single most important thing to me, and it's the hardest thing in the world to do.
Yeah, building automation and control alarms have been terrible for decades.
They have no
and
context.
they need to get better, right? And they're beginning to get better, but yeah, to your point. Perhaps next year's panel discussion is an ontology discussion because that would be a wonderful, wonderful panel discussion. Any more commentary on this particular topic?
No.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on. Enzo, can you give me a real-world case study, perhaps, of where IDCM was applied, where the building automation system in a company was integrated with the data center, and what benefits were derived?
There's actually a well-known case study in the industry on a high-tech company, Silicon Valley based, you can probably start guessing who it is, that was able to defer refabbing the data center, refurbishing the data center, because they were able to take much better utilization of their existing thermal plant. So they were able to focus their existing thermal capacity on the IT loads, exactly like Drew was saying, within the data center. So rather than needing to cool the entire data center, some of which was vacant and unused, or worst case, it had racks that were underutilized. Rather, they refocused their thermal capacity where the IT loads were actually working. And they were able to get several years of additional utility from that data center, excuse me, from that data center without having to invest further in thermal. I think that's a great example of if you weren't aligning your thermal capacity with your IT load, you wouldn't be able to make that connection.
Very good, thank you. Any other commentary from Mark? Okay, moving on. Let's see here, future trends. So looking ahead, what are the anticipated trends in IDCM over the next 5 years? How will they impact roles for HVAC engineers and building automation specialists? So within the context of the audience of HVAC engineers and building automation and facilities folks, how will IDCM changes over time impact them? Let's pick on, all right. Yeah,
I'll take that one on.
All right.
So probably two main things that the engineers need to really be aware of. A lot of sites are becoming more lean. They're trying to take money out of their operational process. To be able to do that, you can't be siloed anymore. I can't just be a mechanical engineer. I just can't be a BMS controls guy. I have to have an understanding of the other aspects of the business, and then cause and effect that we talk about here is what's that doing systemically to the IT systems. If I take this chiller down because I have to do routine maintenance on it, what is it going to affect? What are the effective loads and how do I do that? The other aspect of that is communication. A good engineer can be a great engineer if they can sell their idea. If they can't sell their idea, they can't communicate that idea, it's not going to be implemented. And you're having to deal across mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, you get contractors that are in there, customers that are in there, financial folks, CEO, CFO, the CIO, what's going to be cause and effect. And it's always under a pressure cooker situation. It's always under a hot, something went down. It's when you get asked your opinion, you have to be able to give that within 30 minutes or less, as Drew said. So you need to be able to do that, and you have to be able to communicate very effectively, very succinctly as to what needs to be done, and what's the plan and course of action going forward.
Very good.
One thing.
I see a thumb.
To lead off of what Drew said earlier, context. So what does the future look like? I mean, that has to be taken into account in building any solutions going forward. And I don't want to sound like I'm jumping on the AI bandwagon, because I've got a lot of reservation, not because it can rule the world, but because garbage in, garbage out. I mean, a lot of people see that as the savior of systems. But the reality is it can be taught and hopefully be able to pull out some of those contexts in the systems to help bring those together. But again, garbage in, garbage out.
Well, and to that end, it used to be you could put in systems that were for 30 years.
Yeah.
Then IT started making a lot of business decisions, and it became 5 years. Now it's 2 years. And the technology is changing to where is it hydronic, is it convection, is it liquid cooled? And you got to be able to change with the times, so you have to be dynamic as an engineer.
I think there's a shift of not just kind of project-based, product-based thinking. And I grew up in the building automation space. It was design a project, we go to point to point, pull the plug test, check it out, turn it over, cool, on the next one. And then getting into the operations side has been so much more eye-opening of, that system, that very complex, complicated, unique thing in every data center, every building is its own unicorn, is a living, breathing deal that needs to be managed with the same level of rigor that go into whatever you all put into the initial design. The biggest, most advantageous, cool thing I've seen is a lot of facilities teams starting to adopt some of the processes you see within the IT world. If you've ever worked with an IT help desk, been a part of that world, it is so highly regimented. They have 34 different modules they've defined as part of what's called ITIL, which is the international full standard of how you respond to an incident. how you respond to a request, someone needs a thing, how you respond to putting a change into the production live side of a system is something that up until 5 years ago, I never thought about on the facility side. It was always, we got to take the chiller down, we've got an MOP for it, cool, let it rip. Now, we have conversations, we have a change review board, just like IT does. My IT team, if I request a new VLAN for BAS, it takes a week and a half because they have to go and configure it, they write a change, they put it in front of a group of 10 people who all basically look at it and say, cool, this isn't going to break anything, then let's run it through an appropriate window when all the other changes run. It's that level of, especially within the data center, and we get all these other systems integrated, thinking more like IT, while still being cooler than them because of facilities, is going to help make this a lot more sustainable.
Very good commentary. While you're speaking, we'll keep you speaking. Drew, with regard to efficiency and sustainability, how does IDCM contribute to the sustainability and energy efficiency of a data center?
I mean, I could hang up a sign and be like that meme here that says, change my view, AI is not the end-all be-all for facilities technology just now. Probably have a line a mile long. I don't think it's there yet, to be totally honest. I think what Fred's talking about, the concept of data governance has been new to my team in the last 3 years as well. And so ensuring that every data source is optimized for freshness, how recent is it, accuracy is a 72-degree set point, actually 72 degrees, and quality. Like, do we have gaps in rows? Until that is set, and until we have ontologies that are just kind of a standard, common, everyday thing, in my eye, pushing all of this to the cloud and running more machine learning algorithms, which I would argue is much more prevalent than AI today, that's the dream. I feel like that always has been the dream for a lot of us for the last 10, 20 years, is let the machine optimize. Machine learning has been optimizing every other industry for 30 years, and I hear that argument all the time. People say real estate facilities is behind, and my response is, well, finance is dealing with one system that has like 2 variables. It's what day is it, and what's my closing stock price? Cool, freaking A, you should be able to run machine learning on 5 stocks and predict the next 2 months. We have 10,000 points in 6 different systems, and in office space it's people, but in this case it's servers that ramp up and down. The amount of variability just, I don't know, goes on some scale that I feel like a lot of people just don't appreciate what we do. So once we can get that piece, and we're having the conversations, like we've made more progress in 3 years than we have in 15, that's where it starts to become more of this, cool, let the algorithm determine based on all of these inputs, we still have to give it the outcome. Like, what are we solving for? You can solve for efficiency all day long. If I go to one of my distribution center leads and tell them, I'm going to turn on the machine, Skynet's going to optimize your facility for energy efficiency, I just burned up $5 million worth of on-call. Like, there have to be guardrails, but it's coming. Skynet is life.
Skynet is life.
Well, I think Fred kind of said it too. It's with AI, it's code compounded on top of code. And if you've got bad data to begin with, then you have a bad starting point. If you don't have enough experience to understand what the outcome should be and what you're trying to get to, then you don't know necessarily that it's bad code. Take it back from what you're saying, follow the IT, but also on the facilities side, you still have on and off. If I can't do a latching interlock on something and I don't know what that is, and I just copied somebody else's code and brought it over, next thing I know, I can't shut the data center down. Or I got valves that latch out, to the next example, and I don't know cause and effect, I can't fix it.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad, it was costly, yes. Okay, final prepared question. I'd like each of the panelists to take a crack at it. Let's start with Fred. What advice would you give to professionals just starting to work in data center space? And within the context of this audience of HVAC professionals?
I know that that's one that everybody has been struggling with in a lot of different disciplines. But as we've all said, these systems are network connected. Okay? I always preach the OT message from a cybersecurity standpoint. However, the underlying supporting technology is IT. You've got cables, you've got switches, you've got servers, that kind of thing. So if you're in the HVAC world and you haven't learned some of the basic foundational things about networking, there are some pretty good courses online that, it doesn't require a doctorate to do, but it will give you foundational and functional understanding of networks, because that's what you're working with, right?
Very good, very good. Brad, what advice would you give?
Be prepared for a fast-changing, fast educational environment. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, and kind of to what Fred's saying, everything still goes back to zeros and ones. Everything still goes back to a base premise. It's become better over time. But the software is still software-based, and it's all off of zeros and ones, so understand the basics.
Okay, very good. Andrew, and I can almost, having worked with Drew for many years, I can almost anticipate. I've watched this fella just get on YouTube and then suddenly he's coding something new. We haven't worked together directly in quite a while, but I'm curious what you have to say on this topic.
So I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and I want to know what you thought I was going to say.
All right.
So I wish I kept in touch with this guy because I owe him $5 every time I use this. One of my favorite physics TAs in college would show up to study sessions to help us get through statics and dynamics because it was incredibly hard. He'd show up in his PJs, he'd teach us how to calculate moments of inertia, and then we'd go to the bar. His greatest advice at 2 in the afternoon, greatest advice he ever told us 20 years ago, learn how to learn and then go figure out your life. And for me, that was the start of this industry, is figuring out how to teach yourself, full stop. There is so much that goes into, especially this world, and it is probably the intersection of AHR, of CompTIA and other cybersecurity certifications, and the ITIL space for understanding all of the networking service ops. So it's one of the most interesting, again, massively complex things you can be niche and focus on, but you have to be able to teach yourself.
Very good. Enzo.
So the original question was, for someone getting started, what advice would I give? So I'll answer with an example. If you are designing and building a data center, if you know that data center is going to have NVIDIA chips, you will design that data center different. You have to, you have no choice. If you have such high density, it will affect how you lay out power. It will affect where your plumbing runs. It will affect what kind of cooling you'll be running in there. It will affect your security profile. So I guess the biggest piece of advice I give is look towards the purpose and the role of that data center and include that in early stage design.
Very good. Thank you, panel. Audience, do you have any questions for our panelists?
They are far too nice.
Not a lot. But given our last presentation earlier today, they were quiet and then we started getting up and then the questions started coming. So let's see if that happens.
Here's a question. Why do you think there's no questions?
Yes, I don't know. Is
I
it
got a
late
question.
today?
What did you think he was going to say?
I'll tell you
Still
over
recovering.
here. I'll tell you over
The
here.
artificial intelligence version.
Yes. Okay. Oh, yes, sir.
Actually, okay, so I'll throw one out. So IT is absolutely jam-packed with open source, right? Basically, IT world is built on open source. OT, can you guys comment on that? How should we think about that going, looking for the next 18 months, the next, 5, 10 years?
Perfect state? Absolutely. To a certain extent. Like, I don't think we're going to see a world where everybody is building VB controllers in their shop or in the garage or whatever, but I would love to see open source programming that is universal to every device, regardless of what it is. I think innovation happens a lot faster. I think learning and sharing happens a lot faster. If you could go to GitHub right now and pull down give me a Python program for a lead lag primary chill water pump that works on any device within reason, that'd be great. And not only does that, I think, drive the industry forward, I think that pulls in other folks who may not have even considered it, but they know GitHub and they know software development, and who doesn't know Python these days? It's falling out like HTML used to be 20 years ago. Be cool if it did.
All right. Fred, I can imagine you take the opposite stance.
Well, not exactly the opposite, but I'm sitting here thinking of historically, okay? And I know brand new data centers, you can do whatever you want to. But the infrastructure, or the OT systems that are out there could be 30, 40, 50 years old, right? In fact, I just recently wrote a paper for this group, and I was doing research on the smart building. Did you know the first smart building was 1931? And it was Wilcox Beer Restaurant, and they had an electric eye that opened it. Okay, well, why did I say that? I'm not saying those are still around, but the point being is, we've been in a drive in the control system industry since when I came in 2000. Open with some guardrails, right? Back then, lawn went toward it with each other. Back then is one, pretty much.
Yes, we did.
and that's a good thing. But the risk side of me is anything that becomes open becomes penetrable. So I'm for.
But is that always the case? I mean, because look at how much of the internet is open. So.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of, I mean, you know, I've got some guys who are a lot smarter than I am, and of course they'll tell you first and foremost, there's nothing that cannot be hacked.
Of course.
So,
True.
I'm just saying, when it becomes open, you're opening yourself up. I mean, bad guys have motivations that we don't have, and they don't have budgets and planning or anything like that. So that's my main thing. It's just precautionary, but then also all of the legacy stuff out there, as you begin to make this new stuff, what does that look like in 10 years?
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay, well, we've kept everybody here for 40 minutes in your seats. We appreciate your time. Thank you for attending our session. And enjoy the balance of your show.